I've been meaning to do a video about our living wall system between us and what is normally a very busy road, but it feels like most days there's so much car traffic it's kind of hard to record and be able to hear my own voice, which in large part is the main driver for making this wall in the first place, is to have at least a little bit a solid visual barrier and to some extent some audio barrier from the road. And so this morning I'm filming at 6:30 in the morning in the hopes of having less cars, but it feels like the cars just keep increasing on this road. I'm going to pause every time a car drives by, and this way I won't have to fight with the sound of it. But I'm going to take a look at this wall and see how it's evolving. I believe this may be the 5th year or perhaps the 6th year. If the idea of this project is entirely new to you, I'm going to link here to a playlist on the living wall where we've talked about this since the very beginning of the system. It's 5 or 6 years in, and at this point in the summer months, the only way you can really see that we are in existence back in there is if you look up the driveway. Other than that, it is as dense as I could ever hope for it to be. On the other side of what we're looking at right here is our really complex and wacky and wonderful chicken composting system, but you'd never know if you were walking along the road or driving. So it's hitting the right notes of what we were asking it to do. To my eye, this is an incredibly beautiful and verdant and functional scene. In some ways, importantly, to folks that would really not like what we're up to their eye, this may feel like just an abandoned property and not really draw their eye in much more than that. It's like, oh, folks don't live there, or folks just don't tend to the place. And that's fine if that's what they feel. There are some elements, some characters in this scene that have been really coming into their own this year that I'd like to talk about. This is a willow, Salix, I want to say Salix integra. It's a variegated Japanese willow. I'll put a note on the screen if I've used the wrong name there. And this took forever to get established. We're on the north side of the living wall here, and so you can see it's really leaning out in order to get the light it needs, but they're finally here a little bit. And I think the key to preserve them, I think they're a very unique and beautiful aspect to this, such a unique color. I don't want to lose them to competition, is that this fall we'll take some of these hybrid poplars, which in the last few years have just exploded, about 25, 30 feet tall, and we'll go through and pollard them. Same thing with the curly willow, and get them cut roughly to around 3 feet or 4 feet so that they start putting more vegetation in this realm, the 5 to 8 foot realm, and give more visual barrier so that more light can come into the next layer. That's definitely a theme to where this living wall is at this point. It's incredibly abundant and luscious and wonderful, and also the elements that our tree forms have. As much as I thought I was pruning, I mean, I cut these alders back really hard. I pollarded them about 5 feet, and they're working really nicely, but they could be cut back even yet again to help these English walnuts get more light. Certainly the curly willows in that area have gotten so tall that now they're beginning to thin out. This is in our neighbor's driveway, but this would do really well to be cut back when they're dormant and thicken things up. So to set something in motion like this with as much diversity and different forms of plants, certainly, I'm not going to say requires, but it needs to have that level of interaction and pruning. The chop and drop aspect is pretty critical. We will wait until they're dormant so that we don't hurt those trees. These have been really great allies to us, and we don't want to see them pass away. They're very actively growing, so we'll let that happen for the rest of the season, but address that in the fall or early spring next year. We may be offering a lot more cuttings so that instead of just cutting them and letting them rot on the ground, they could be supporting other folks trying to do living walls as well. It's really neat to see the black locust in here has come into being nearly full-sized tree form. That'll be another one that we'll pollard. I don't think in general in this system we need a lot of nitrogen fixers because we are to the north of, but also more importantly down slope of the chicken composting system. Whenever there's a really intense rain, any nutrients that are leaching from the chicken yard are caught by this system. And for the most part, I'd say these plants are about as hyper nutrified as they could be. But if you were trying to establish a living wall in bare soil, or from a mowed lawn, or in a depleted area, you'd want to have a lot more nitrogen fixers to help get things up and running. So I've just mentioned that black locust, which will be cut back. That'll be a plume of fertility for all the other layers, like the elderberries in here. I mentioned the alders on the far end. Those are certainly wonderful nitrogen fixers. On this side, we have river locust, or Morpha fruticosa, really beautiful shrub form nitrogen fixer in the pea family. And we also have Baptisia australis. So each of these characters are providing additional fertility to the system. I wouldn't describe it as needed, but they're so beautiful, and they don't mind getting extra fertility too. So really, so far, I've just been looking at the outer edge of this system. We looked at the new variegated willows. We've looked at some of the tree form that needs to be cut back down in order to keep things dense where they need to be. Elderberry's been doing extremely well in here. Beautiful plant, highly valuable. The nectar flow is for the bees. The fruit will be for the birds. And we'll take cuttings from these elderberries to keep them compact and tight and dense in the fall or next spring, to either propagate elsewhere or sell or trade or just give away. And elder has proven itself to be an incredible component to this system for sure. Now the keystone, or what I would have described as the keystone back in the day, are these giant miscanthus grass in here. And they've just the other day gotten to be about my height. They're around 6 feet tall right now. They die back in the fall. We cut the stems after the winter. I've made videos talking about cutting and working with the stems. You can barely see them now, but this whole fence line is woven with their sticks. We use the stems from miscanthus extensively in the garden for trellising and marking plants, protecting things. And now it is dense enough in there. They expand, but not very fast. But it's so dense that I would have a hard time getting in there without being soaking wet from morning dew. And it is also so dense that I don't think deer move in there anymore. This layer, the miscanthus layer, really helped give us protection very early on. And now at this point has become an incredible source of biomass. We can chop and drop as needed. And you can see there's an English walnut a little further in there that's really starting to become the canopy. That would be there are a handful of trees. There's some walnuts, there's some English walnut, Japanese walnut, some plums, some oaks, and some persimmons that are planted in there that I would like to see be canopy in the long run. These other trees will cut back, but the miscanthus in there is still providing great utility. And as things go along, there's grapes further along the fence line. It's a little hard for me to point at them because I'm holding a tree back. But anyway, back in there are some grapes, and they'll run through the miscanthus and up into the elderberry and locust and kind of knit the whole thing together to support them from heavy winds. If I take a look here on the west side, so we've been looking on the east side predominantly, there's no miscanthus on this side. It's another carryover of the same theme. I think things need to be cut pretty hard in here. One of the main characters on this side are these beautiful hazels. These are English American hybrid hazels, and they can get 20 feet, 30 feet tall, and they're starting to get a little sparse underneath. You can see through here a bit more than I'd like. So this is another area that needs some pruning. It can be really hard to make a call like that because these shrubs are so happy the way they are, but I know if we were to prune them hard, they would respond in a positive way. This would be another one that we'll wait till next spring before they break bud to do so. But in cutting the hazel, what I'll plan to do is cut them flush to ground. They'll be coppiced, and then we can stool layer them. We can add soil around them to propagate them. That will give us more light for aronia and yastaberry and other currants that are in through here. Some of the sunchokes will be able to get more light, and we'll get more visual barrier from the road. So setting in motion this complexity and saying I refuse to do any pruning will ultimately reduce the functionality, reduce the vigor, and reduce the diversity. So the hard prune is kind of a key component for this to work. The traffic's starting to really pick up, so there is not much more of a break for me to film here. So I'm going to leave it there for now. But yeah, that's the living wall, thriving and working, and certainly needing to be cut a lot more frequently and deeply in order to keep the visual barrier where we need it to be. Let me know if you've got some questions about how this is working. One thing I plan to do 100% is when we actually make these hard cuts throughout, I'll document that process. I'll document the thought process that drives the decisions about whether we're doing a cut at 3 feet or 6 feet or flush to ground, what the different reasons might be. It might seem complex in the abstract, but when you actually see the flow of how those decisions are made, I think they gel and make sense. Anyway, let us know. Are there things that are missing? Are there aspects you have concerns over? Either way, hope you're thriving where you are and have a little break from the road if you live near a busy road like we do. The gentle sounds of progress. Take care.